President Trump and El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele met in Washington, marking the first Oval Office visit by a Latin American leader since Trump's return to power. According to media reports, Bukele plays a key role in Trump's revived immigration crackdown, agreeing to take hundreds of suspected Venezuelan gang members into El Salvador's prison system. Both leaders pushed back yesterday on calls to repatriate Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador last month. Despite pressure from the US Supreme Court, Bukele called the idea of returning Garcia preposterous. Adding more controversy, President Trump said he's considering deporting violent US citizens to El Salvador, a move legal experts say would violate US law. Trump insisted he'd only proceed if it were legal, but questions remain about the protections American citizens would have if sent to a country previously flagged by the US for human rights abuses. Protests erupted in both Washington and New York. Demonstrators rallied outside the Salvadoran embassy and consulate demanding the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Let's hear now from President Bukele, President Trump, and one of the protesters.
President Trump, thank you so much. How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please? As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it because nobody can understand. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand. It's always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him.
And this is a meeting of two fascist leaders that are planning how to terrorize and mass incarcerate and warehouse and torture thousands and thousands of innocent human.
Well, joining us to discuss all of these developments and the meeting that took place between Bukele and US President Trump is Daniel Boardman, senior correspondent for the National Telegraph, joining us from Toronto in Canada. Daniel, thank you ever so much for being here with us today. I do want to start on that meeting that took place between Trump and Bukele. This show of unity, this talk of further deportations. What is that relationship like between Trump and Bukele, and how will that play out in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, I mean, Trump tends to work on like bilateral relationships and personal relationships with other leaders. So in terms of in a vacuum, Trump and Bukele, do they get along? It seems very much so the two of them get along and work together. So Bukele seems to be very important to Trump's immigration plan and rhetoric. Bukele, for reasons that it might be hard to understand in the West, built mega prisons and kind of as a strong man, let's be honest, use strongman Latin American powers to just throw a bunch of MS-13 gang members in jail to solve the country's massive drug gang criminal violence program. Like, you're talking levels of extreme violence that he did curb, and in the process of doing so probably does not comply with all your classic international compacts and Western standards that would regulate a common U.S. So Trump has basically made some sort of deal with Bukele that these Salvadorian super prisons can be used to deport illegal immigrants from the United States, particularly the gangsters sent there. And you know what? This is something that I think you can question out, but a lot of people did vote for it in a way. And people don't have a problem when it's done right. So when violent MS-13 gang members with spider tattoos or whatever it is, their face tattooed up and they got, AK-47s in their hands, both literally and figuratively, to deter that, I think most people would be fine with that. But you're dealing with the problem of potentially like, okay, how many non-gang members or innocent people are getting caught up in this and then sent to these mega prisons with hardened MS-13 gang members, and there you have a problem.
Yes, so, Daniel, sorry to interject there. I do want to pick up on that because, of course, the Supreme Court have acknowledged that Abrego Garcia, a El Salvadoran national who was living in the US illegally has been deported by mistake. They called it an administration error. Speaking at this meeting, it was clear that Abrego Garcia is not going to be returned. What message does this send for the people of America who potentially are migrants themselves living legally in the US, but also potentially people who are advocates, knowing that the Supreme Court has made this ruling, but clearly that's not going to make a difference to Bukele and Trump working in unity?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, listen, if Bukele and Trump wanted this guy back, he'd be back. If they wanted him there, he'd be there. And that's sort of the world we live in. And this is one of those things where everyone's claiming their own thing. So you could obviously have a Supreme Court ruling that if you can't mistakenly deport someone, which is obvious. And then the El Salvadorian tenuous position, I guess, is he actually was an MS-13 gang member. And because he's part of MS-13, legally, you know, according to Bukele's own thing, he can't move him across the borders because that would violate the El Salvadorian constitution. It rings a little hollow, to be honest, to most people. Again, I think everyone is. The power to make the super prisons is also the power to take one guy out of the super prison and send him back to comply with that. So, I mean, there is an obvious, I guess, dishonest game or a half-truth where both sides could acknowledge that if they wanted this to happen, they could make it happen. But, you know, this is sort of the thing with the Trump administration, the Trump mentality is sort of never back down, never admit you're wrong, because to be charitable to them, maybe they feel that if they were to back down on one thing and set the precedent that they had backed down on everything immigration, you would have the entire establishment then combing through all ICE, DOJ, and just being an absolute nuisance and stopping them from forming their agenda of deporting actual illegal immigrants and criminals. So it's another thing, but you know, you hit on it. Trump does work at Trump speed, and how long is this going to stay as the headline of the day? Because 3 days from now, I doubt we're going to be talking about a specific Supreme Court ruling on this immigration thing. There might be another thing related to this topic. You might hit something about Iran. Then it might be again Russia or Ukraine or something else might be said or done, and then we're off to the next thing, and this is left in the dust. So I think this might be a signal that I think Trump is going to use El Salvador as a sort of a dumping ground for immigration crime as he sees it, and he's just going to, I think, go on this until he is effectively stopped by someone. But that's the thing is people are so gaslit because there are very legitimate deportations and actual terrorist supporters and criminals that should be deported, and you have the media defending them, but then you want to make the case that some of these innocent people or people who are picked up by mistake or the circumstances are also not deported. So I think everything's getting sort of just turned up in the culture war, and then the attention span of just society to
yes,
keep
Daniel,
on.
I'm sorry to interject once again. We are running short of time. You mentioned there may be a new headline in 2 or 3 days. Trump mentioning that US citizens may be deported to El Salvador. This would certainly blow open the conversation, given the fact that Trump's administration so far has been so clear on this being criminals, gang members, drug dealers. If US citizens are starting to be deported, what does that change in this game?
Oh, everything. It's fundamentally insane. It breaks the Constitution. It breaks the very foundation of America. It's a crazy thing to even float out and suggest if there are American citizens committing American crimes and you want to be tough on crime, you yourself should just man up and build a prison and put people in jail. Like, it's not that hard. Like, there are prisons who could put people in jail, but you have to keep them in American jails. And again, this is one of the things that Trump does by completely undermining any potential points he might have on immigration, where there are things that his base voted for, and there are certainly problems with the immigration models of other Western countries that people have talked ad nauseum about. But yeah, when you mix that with El Salvador is going to be also used as a detention center for people I deem too criminal or dangerous, fundamentally insane thing to propose. And yeah, it's going to undermine. Yeah, it's one of those things Trump does that undermines him going forward.
Daniel Boardman, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing your insight. The conversation about immigration and deportation continues to rumble on in